November 2nd, 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a letter from Arthur James Balfour, who was the British Foreign Secretary, to announce Britain's promise and support to Jewish people in the Palestine. This is what was written. His Majesty's government viewed with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. This declaration was pronounced by the British while Palestine was still under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. During this period in time, on January 10, 1920, the League of Nations officially came into existence. With 41 member states, it was established as an international organization to ensure world peace. 2 years later, in July 1922, the League formally approved the British mandate for Palestine, which incorporated the principles of the Balfour Declaration. The separated states were voted in by the United Nations General Assembly, which was called Resolution 181, partitioning Palestine into two states, one Arab and one Jewish. Now this is where the saga of promises, lies, and betrayals begin. You see, in 1915, Sir Henry McMahon, who was the British High Commissioner in Egypt, made a promise to Sharif Hussein of Mecca, who at the time was king of the Arabs. The promise was that Britain would recognize and support the independence of the Arabs within the territories proposed by him. As a part of the promise to Sharif Hussein for an independent Arab state, he would be required to help the British fight against the Ottoman Empire. The Arabs were prepared and willing to fulfill their side of the agreement. All British politicians and officials were aware of their obligation to offer Palestine to Hussein as a result of McMahon-Hussein correspondence, but Britain had subsequently made other conflicting promises. On May 16, 1916, the British and French regime known as Mandates had concluded a secret agreement between themselves to establish the Arab province of the Ottoman Empire. But the lies and promises did not stop there. Great Britain's layers of deception with their allies continues. Observing the slow and obvious decline of the Ottoman Empire for many years, Great Britain, France, and Russia, who were allies, secretly plotted how they would divvy up the territories throughout the Middle East into spheres of influence. But it was Britain and France that had the most interest in the region between the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf. It was between November 1915 to March 1916, representatives of Britain and France negotiated an agreement, with Russia also expressing their approval. Later known as Sykes-Picot Agreement, terms were secretly negotiated between British diplomat Mark Sykes and French diplomat and lawyer Francois-Georges Picot concerning the collapse of the Ottoman Empire after World War I. It was then documented in a letter and signed by British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey to Paul Carbon, France's ambassador to Great Britain, on May 16, 1916. Under the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the Syrian coast and much of the modern-day Lebanon went to Area A under France, and Britain would take the direct control over Area B, which was central and southern Mesopotamia, around the Baghdad and Basra provinces. The agreement never actually materialized. The Arabs were never aware of the agreement until the Bolshevik Revolution, who were the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party. They discovered the deed. The text was then published. Starting from the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the conflicting and unrealistic promise to the Arabs remained at the heart of today's Israeli-Palestinian conflict. From that alone, Arabs were in anger and resentful that Britain's failure to fulfill its promise to create an independent Arab state, which they believed was a violation of their right to self-determination. The Arab nationalists referred to the territory as their own and had inhabited over 90% of Palestine. And now, because of the betrayal by the British, 55% of the allotted land was given to the Jewish state for full control. Over decades, the population of Jewish settlers in Palestine increased, particularly the 1930s, as the British government fostered their immigration. Between 1922 and 1940, the Jewish population tripled. It reported that in 1922, only 11% of the population in the region was Jewish, and by the early 1940s, it was at 30%. As migration of Jews increased, the clash between Israel and the Arab community intensified with more violence as hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled out of their homes.